Hey everybody, welcome to Apocalypse Rising. Thanks for tuning in. I know it's been a real long time since I've done one of these, but I decided, I don't know, I just kind of was in the mood tonight. It's a Friday. It's been a good week. I hope you all have had a good week and have some plans for this weekend. I know life's changed quite a bit for all of us. It's been a long time since I talked about this stuff on the mic. And for me, it's kind of just more of the same. So I don't really know what that means. Does that just mean that this happens all the time? And things just move on. Well, yeah, to a certain extent, that's like common sense. But I feel like each situation has its own potential. And I feel like this one here is a little bit different. And it's probably because we've never gone through something like this. Like most of us have never lived in a time where there's propaganda everywhere. There's a virus killing people. The economy is just like either turning into something different or about to completely collapse. The environment is, pretty much falling apart, but science is starting to come through with some pretty crazy stuff at the same time. So this is a paradigm shift. If nothing else, we're living in one of those times where things are definitely going to change from this. And it feels like there's a lot of energy that's like hanging on to the past. I feel that, and I also feel that there's this desire to springboard into the future. And what I hope we can do is just make sure that we take lessons from past and keep them in mind when it comes to unintended consequences and the cliche of the pathway to hell is paved with good intentions or whatever. That we got to consider what we're doing in this time. This is like the only time frame in which you get to do that in these situations. Once it starts going one way or the other, that's the end. So while you're right in the middle and you kind of get to control it a little bit and shape where it's going to move, once it starts rolling, that's the way it goes. So in my opinion, there's a way for it just to roll into an abyss and just keep getting worse and worse and worse and worse. Or there's a way for it to kind of veer off, maybe get on a bumpy road for a little bit, but then come out into the clear and have all this prosperity and opportunity and stuff. So I really hope it's the second option of the two, but who knows? And that's the whole point, is that we can only do so much. There's always going to be outside influence. I mean, what can you do if a rogue asteroid comes out of nowhere undetected and smashes into the planet? There's really nothing you can do. And those kind of events you don't have much control over. But I feel like where we're at now, we do. We have a lot of control with the virus. Whether you believe it's a hoax or it's a scamdemic or it was Chinese, biological warfare, whatever you think it is, it doesn't really matter because it is. And people die from it and get sick from it. And so we've responded. And this is the part I'm talking about, shaping where we go. We've responded, and this is what's come of it. And the really hard part about it is you can't really say, oh, well, if we would have done it this way, it would have turned out differently. Well, it would have turned out differently, most likely, but would that have been good or bad? Who knows? We didn't do it. We didn't try it. We tried this, and this is what's happening. So, I mean, at the moment, I've almost just become numb to the stupid virus. I just don't even care anymore. It's like, whatever. Maybe there's going to be a vaccine coming soon. Herd immunity is going to come regardless if a vaccine comes or not. It's going to come faster if a vaccine comes. There's going to be waves of it. You can't open up gyms and restaurants even at 25% capacity and not expect to see an increase in cases, which is what's happening now. And masks are not. You can't be in a building with recirculating air with an airborne virus. I don't care what anybody says, it's fully airborne. This is super contagious, and it will go down in history as one of those viruses that was very elusive in terms of being able to stop it from going from person to person. worst case scenario is we get herd immunity because it goes through the whole population. Even with vaccines, it just mutates. I mean, what if it just ends up being like a cold, but it kills, even 0.26%, however you want to break down the stupid math. The numbers of people that it kills are going to be way higher than a cold, and probably equivalent to the flu, but be like the cold when it comes to how you catch it and how your immune system responds to it. It's coronavirus. We don't know. We really don't know. A lot of what we're seeing right now is just hope. And it's crazy because that's exactly what's going on with the stock market. People are just hoping that this is going to come back soon, that Donald Trump's not lying, and everybody's going to have a vaccine, because the military is just going to come in and start poking people in the arms, and they can mobilize in days, and there's billions of doses ready at the helm and all this stuff, and so people are optimistic that this is going to go away sooner or later. They hush the scientists who say, man, this is probably not going to be under control until fall of 2021. And under control still means it's going to be out there spreading around. It's going to just become a normal part of life. So that's something that we have to come to terms with as well. And I think a lot of people are not coming to terms with that. They're just kind of hoping and sweeping it under the rug that it'll just go back to normal. And if it's not the COVID, it's going to be the bird flu, or it's going to be the pig flu, or it's going to be something. For me, that's what it's all about. It's always been about economic collapse, civil unrest, war, and climate change. Those have been my main focuses since I can remember, since I was a kid. I was always a weird kid. My mom would say, "Why are you talking about that stuff?" And it's like, I don't know. I think that's what's going to happen. And so it's happened before, and it feels just like it's happening again. And there's no reason to say like, "Oh, that's you trying to prophesize and tell the future and all this dumb stuff." No, I'm just looking around at what's going on and saying, this is what's happening right now. This is what's happening. So even my stepmom asked me the other day, she says, "Well, I don't know about this virus. It looks like maybe it's finally starting to go away, but what do you think is going to happen after? What's the next thing?" And I said, climate change, because climate change is always on like the forefront of my mind. But let's just face it. Look at what's going on the planet. I mean, how long ago did I make a video about this stuff? 4 years? 4 years ago, and I was talking about the crack in Antarctica, and now Antarctica is just melting. 4 years ago, they're talking about there's no way we're going to keep it under 1.5 degrees Celsius. You can go back and watch my videos talking about what happens when it gets to 4 and 5, and that it's gotten to 10 in the past, and runaway greenhouse, and just really basic science. It's not rocket science, that's for sure, and it's happening right in front of our eyes. Animals just washing up, and polluted waters. They got brain-eating amoebas getting into the normal city water now. I mean, yeah, it's not super common. It happened in Louisiana before too, and that just happened in Texas and killed that little kid. And they flushed it out, and they say it's all good. But how to get in there? I haven't heard anything about how it got in there, and they do get in there. Are they multiplying more? I mean, we are at solar minimum, so who knows what's going on with multiplication when it comes to bacteria and amoebas and viruses and all that kind of stuff. So it just feels like all that climate change stuff is right in front of our faces now. Like, you can't ignore what's going on with the planet. It's October 9th where I live, and I think it was 87 degrees today. The averages are like in the 70s. I remember when there were times when it would snow on Halloween. There's no way it's going to snow on Halloween. And if it does, that just goes to show it went from being 85, 87 degrees down to snowing. That's not right either. So it's obvious we're running out of water. They had to get like extra water from this basin to fill up the river so that we could still have municipality water use, and I think agricultural water use too. I mean, it was the Rio Grande is drying up. So, and they're saying, "Oh, we got like whichever one of those fronts, La Nina, coming through in the wintertime, so it's going to be dry." And we'll see what happens. But if it's dry in the wintertime, this next spring and summer is going to be bad for water. We're definitely going to have to ration water. There's going to be all kinds of fighting over who gets what divvied out where. There could be a potential reduction in crop growth. Then the farmers don't make as much money, and you know how all that goes. And that's the real part of climate change. You've got these huge hurricanes coming in and blasting all this stuff, and it's great because you get all this federal money and these insurance companies and stuff, but that just puts things more in debt, and lots of times it'll take the insurance companies out. So it has financial ramifications too. But then on the other hand, you've got all this like crazy stuff coming out of science. I mean, they're claiming they're going to have fusion reactors in the next 10 years. Wow, I didn't see that coming. I mean, I had a class in college once. It was a technical writing class, and we had to pick like a topic that we were passionate about, and then we had to write all these different kinds of like technical documents, like pamphlets and flyers and little videos, and we had to make like a Google Sites and put all that stuff on there. It was a crazy class because it was one of those classes where the instructor just expected so much work. I was actually in grad school. It was my first semester in grad school, and I thought I'd take that class because, oh, hey, this could help me in grad school and technical writing. Cool. And man, it was more difficult than my grad school class was. And I ended up only getting a B+ in it. Because of this stupid journal thing we were supposed to keep that was like 90 pages or something. I'm sorry. I got a full-time job. I was working 2 jobs, going to grad school. I was like, I'll get a B+, that's fine. But I remember that my topic was our dying oceans. And so, I talked about what I always talk about. And then we had to put solutions in there. Obviously they wouldn't just let me be doom and gloom like I am fear mongering. They said, no, you got to try to what are some solutions? You know how they say, what are some solutions? Like they're making me think about that. I already think about that stuff, but what I'm trying to focus on here is that this is the problem at hand. And so I thought about it and I said, okay, well, I mean, in a utopian world where we could just reverse climate change, it would be about us voting and politicians and businesses and just whoever has capital funneling all that into fusion development and restructuring all the way that we live with Earth ships, reducing our consumption, and filtering our sewage and our water with reverse osmosis because it's so nasty and dirty. We're going to have to start recycling shit water if we want to still drink without doing desalination, which the ocean's already unstable. Now you want to desalinate it. That, that might be super temporary, but you're taking water out of the ocean now. So that's just dumb for the long term. People don't think long term. Our civilization is going to perish. Let's take it out of the ocean. Okay, fine. Go ahead and do that and see we perish for another reason. And a lot of it has to do with us taking water out of the ocean. So it doesn't really matter. We're going to perish regardless. And so, I'm looking at this stuff and I'm like, all right, wow, fusion in 10 years. That's crazy. Because when I was researching for that project, they were talking about 30, 40 years, and that was 3 years ago. And so 4 years ago, now it went from 40 years away down to 10. That's like a 16-year increase in 4 years. So, wow. They must be onto something there. And then they've got these little diamonds. There's I think they're radioactive diamond batteries now that can just basically sit there and charge. It's funny because I thought of a weird story once, and it had to do with fusion and batteries that could stay charged by themselves and never need to be plugged in. And it was a scenario where it's a bunch of robots. Civilization has created these robots, and they do whatever. They're our police force. They're our military. They produce all our crops. Basically, they do all the work. And they have these little batteries in them that are basically like those diamond nuclear batteries, and they never have to be charged, and they just stay forever. And they just plug that thing into the robot, and then it has all this armor over it, and that's how it functions. And then at that time, we also had made this huge nuclear fusion reactor to power the planet, and for free, especially in terms of emissions. It just doesn't put out any emissions, and it gives you endless power basically. So we had created a big one of those, and civilization was great. Everybody's on their virtual reality and they're just kicking back. They don't have to do shit. And then all of a sudden that fusion reactor blows up, boom. and EMPs, the whole planet, like the whole planet EMPs. But the crazy thing about it is those little diamond batteries still work. So the robots are still working, and we don't have electricity as humans. Now, what the fuck kind of scenario is that going to bring? Um, I don't know, just create. And then, of course, there would have to be some sort of like virus that gets implanted into the robots' brains and they become, against us or something, Skynet type of thing. But we wouldn't be able to fight them with anything. Like we wouldn't, because an EMP would just disable everything. Um, which is crazy to think about. We're that close to fusion. And there's some other things, like they're finding these little critters that they can take the processes of the functioning and convert it into power somehow, like electricity. Their scientists are doing some crazy stuff. They let off those mosquitoes in Florida. They're genetically engineered mosquitoes that supposedly take out populations of mosquitoes by being born infertile females or something like that. And so they just let those things go. And science is doing a lot of stuff with this vaccine on warp speed, and it makes you kind of wonder, like, wow, how much is science really going to come through? It's come through in the past, so who knows? But I told my stepmom, I said, I think it's going to be climate change next. And in all reality, I think it's going to be societal collapse. I just think that climate catastrophe is just going to kind of be part of it, especially towards the tail end. Because if the stock market somehow doesn't crash, then it's completely turned into a different kind of economic system that we've ever been part of. And it's all going to be debt based. And it's basically just going to be like, how much more debt can you produce and it still be worth something? And I don't really know how they're going to swing that. I'm not an economist. I have no idea how that stuff works. And I don't even pretend. I pretend to know a lot of stuff, but I don't know anything about economics and all of those different kind of like mechanisms and stuff they have in there. I mean, I know somebody who told me they think the whole stock market's run by Watson. So who knows what's going on there, but I can tell you that there are some basic fundamentals of economics, and it feels like we've gotten away from those to the point where we should have seen some sort of major correction that we just haven't seen. So that tells me that we're shifting in. This is also part of the paradigm shift that we're part of right now. We're shifting into something different. That's the only explanation. Because if that's not the case, then the entire globe is going to financially collapse. Therefore, the entire civilization on the globe is going to collapse right behind it. And all you're going to have after that is war and disease and climate change. So I really hope that that's not the direction that we're going here. But it is the direction that I feel like we've been going in for a while. That's why I talk about it. And it's great to say, like, look at science doing this stuff with fusion. That's 10 years away. We could be past the point of no return to where 10 years isn't even something we see. I feel like it's going to be 2028. And if we're still here in like earnest, then we got lucky, or we made some really good choices, but we're going to need a lot of luck regardless of what choices we make. So we just got to keep our fingers crossed. It's interesting because I haven't talked to Andrew in a long time, like in person or anything. We text a lot. I mean, he's still a really good friend of mine, and I'm hoping after this whole thing clears up, we can kind of get together and maybe do some podcasts. Hell, I wouldn't mind doing them like remotely again, like we used to. I don't know. It's crazy because I'm in a group in this psychology class that I'm taking for my master's degree, and we could have done it by ourselves, but we could also do it as a group. And there's a person in my class who's my coworker, and she's really cool. And she says, well, do you want to do it as a team? And I said, yeah, sure, that's fine. Because really, in all honesty, I don't give a fuck about anything really. And so I was like, cool, let's do it together. And I didn't have any idea. And she says, well, let's do this and let's do that. And we'll come up with a survey and all this stuff. And I came up with something, and she's like, well, not to be picky. And it's funny because I mean, I'm just in it to just kind of do it. That's kind of how I've always felt about things. When it comes to me, it's just like, you know, I'm going to just get what I need to do done here. I'm not going to take it too seriously. Some people just take things so seriously. Um, and I have no idea where I was going with that, but I feel bad because she just told me she's pregnant. And so she's having kids. And so obviously I'm not going to say any of this kind of stuff around her anymore. I mean, we used to talk about it, but I'm that kind of person where once somebody has a kid or they have kids involved, typically I don't talk about it. I mean, it depends on the age of the kids. But if you have kids, the last thing you want to hear about is how we're just headed down a freaking disaster here. Oh, and so I think what I was talking about was Andrew. So I'm the kind of person where I'm just like, you know what? Whatever, dude, let's do it. I don't care. I'm not trying to be a professional here. I'm just trying to fuck around. And that's probably why I won't ever be super successful. And once again, I don't really care. Whatever happens, people are like, oh, aren't you afraid of you losing your job? You work in higher ed and it's getting destroyed. And I'm like, I know. I'd already dodged one bullet. Someone did get let go. And I dodged that bullet. And it looks like if things continue the way they continue, then I'm either going to have to dodge another bullet or I'm going to have to eat shit. And the way I look at it is I don't care. What I'm doing right now is I'm just stacking up as much money as I can. And I'm stockpiling a little extra food, maybe 6 months worth of food and a couple years worth of money, and just gonna wait it out if that's what happens. I mean, I'm the kind of person where I think, oh well, if I get laid off, then I got money to live. I'm not going to become homeless instantly. Maybe I can turn this into something, or there's going to be other opportunities. That's the point. And so, what I feel like with Andrew is that he's like serious. He wants to make something of himself, and he would like to do it through podcasting and social media, I'm sure. Because when we were doing his project for school, he was all pumped about that. Well, if we get this many members and they subscribe for $1 a day, you start making $100,000 a year. He was doing the business side, everything. He was analyzing it, bots and buying likes and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, man, what the fuck ever, dude. That's awesome. You should do that. I think he'd be real successful at it. I don't know why he has such a hang up on doing his own thing. And I told him, I'm like, dude, I'll be a guest speaker on your show, whatever. I don't care. If you want to have a crazy old dude like me on there talking a bunch of hot air on your show, fucking I'll do it, man. No, you don't have to pay me. I don't care. Now, I mean, if you start making millions of dollars and you want to throw me a bone or something, yeah, sure, I'm not going to say no, but I don't look at it that way. I would look at it more as like me and my buddy just bullshitting over some kind of social media stuff and putting it out there and seeing what happens. Who the fuck knows? I watch some of this stuff where I'm like, damn, that video has 80,000 views. What the hell was that guy even talking about? And that's probably what people think about me. That's why when I was doing it, I was getting like 100 views. I think I had like 22 subscribers. I knew that was not my calling. This is not my calling, but I do like to do it. And I think it would be fun to do this kind of stuff with Andrew again, just because we have like this weird dynamic where we think the same thing, but we really view how it's unfolding completely different. And there's a few things that we really see eye to eye on, and usually that has to do with like cosmic stuff and some of that, like we really agree about the universe and the influence of the cosmos and all that kind of stuff. I mean, we agree 100% on that. But when it comes to like politics and why things are the way they are, we're like on opposite ends of the spectrum. But it's crazy because we still come to the same conclusion. So we never really sit there and argue. Very rarely are we arguing. I think with him, it's more of like we're just conversing. And I think that's what makes it cool. And so, man, I try to encourage him, but he just like either gets discouraged or I think he thinks I'm trying to blow him off or something. Like, I don't want to do that. No, that's not it, man. I really think that it's something that he could do and be successful at. But all I would do is just drag him down. Maybe if I was just a guest speaker every once in a while amongst other like actual guest speakers that know what the fuck they're talking about, it would be cool. I would kind of be not really like the Eddie Bravo or the Alex Jones, but I would be like that kind of weird person that says this off the wall shit that people are like, what the fuck did that guy just say? Whoa, who does this guy think he is? Kind of stuff. And that's just my persona. It's funny because I teach a class at the university, and really a lot of it is about self exploration, degree planning, and career development. And it's just so ironic that I teach this class because I never really did any of that stuff. You know, I worked dead end jobs until I was in my mid 20s. I dropped out of college. I lived in apartments and maintained horrible relationships and just drove cars into the ground and made a lot of bad decisions when it comes to that stuff. But I am who I am now for it, and I don't regret it at all. I have really good memories of that time doing that. But now I'm in a position where I'm trying to teach people how to, you know, have introspection and then figure out how they can get to where they want to go utilizing the resources that they have at this point in their life, and to look at things as more than just like, oh, I read that in a book, like actually experience life and learn from everything. And then how to like apply that to being successful when it comes to your career and even just getting hired in the first place. And so we go over self-marketing and stuff. And for me, it's ironic because I've never done anything real great in my life, and I've really just been lucky. It's all been luck. I mean, even when I got this job, I was a work study. They hired 3 work studies. I was already graduated. I shouldn't have even got hired in the first place. And then I moved up into senior academic advisor in like 4 months after I became a work study. And then we didn't even need a work study because I just did everything. I did the work study stuff and I did the advisor stuff. Eventually we got work studies to do the front because I had my own office. But when I first started, I didn't even have an office. I just had the front, and I was advising students in the front, and they realized, okay, Ian, you're hired as an advisor, you know? So it wasn't even like, oh, hey, you know, what's your self-marketing scheme and what's your resume look like and what's your cover? Like none of that shit was even mattered for me. And I didn't even know anybody. So I can't even say, oh, it's more about who you know than what you know, even though I say that all the time because I know it's the truth. I haven't experienced that. You know, it's kind of more like, oh, I just lucked out again and something happened that put me in a better direction. I've tried not to ever go in reverse. And so far it's been pretty good. I've been pretty successful at that. And so when I'm teaching this class and talking about like, oh, the importance of picking the right class, I just took whatever I wanted. I didn't have any goal in my mind. My goal was to complete my bachelor's degree and see what happens. But I can't say that in this class. That's not good. You know, that's not going to lead to very good learning outcomes for the course objectives. So I just think it's funny that, you know, I advise freshman students, hey, this is your opportunity to make something of yourself. Don't drop out like I did. And now I'm here telling you not to drop out. You don't want to be like me, you know, is basically what I'm saying. But I flip it, I twist it. I say, it doesn't really matter what you do because you could end up like me and it's not so bad. And look at how I went about it. There's people that own their own businesses that are some of the richest people in the world that didn't even graduate from high school. Let's be honest about it. So, you know, it's crazy when it comes to that. But right now, I just feel like, I don't know. I feel like that's it. I feel like more than anything, me and Andrew need to do a podcast again. But I ain't about to go meet up with that dude in person and be talking right there, spitting in each other's faces. You know, I mean, we always drink. That's for sure. I'm drinking right now. I'm celebrating. I'm almost done with my master's degree. I got my 3rd capstone. I had to do an e-portfolio, and it's due tomorrow, I think by midnight. So I got to get a video off my office computer, put it on there, put some more examples on it, and I'm done with that. I don't care if I get a B- as long as I pass. You know, and it's crazy because my internship is this class that I teach, and I had to revamp it because it wasn't working. And it was pretty easy for me because I was a liberal arts graduate and I'm a liberal arts advisor. So to create a course for liberal arts about how to get into the program and how to view your degree and how to use it to your advantage, you know, it just kind of came naturally. But I get a lot of feedback, and almost all the feedback's good. So, you know, even though I don't really take that path, I'm still very effective at getting across the goals, you know, the course objectives and learning outcomes. seem to be pretty high quality, pretty high up there. I mean, obviously it's not everybody. I don't think you can expect that, but I think it's, anywhere from 96 to 99% of the students are passing the course and turning in all their assignments. And when I get their reflective feedback at the end, they've learned what the outcomes were. So I don't really know if I could ask for more than that, but hopefully it shows through in my internship and I'm able to pass my capstone. And then once I'm done with this psychology class, I'm done. I got my master's degree. And now I'm debating whether I want to go do a PhD, because in the spring we don't have to take the GRE or the GMAT. And usually you do. This is a weird program. I mean, you don't have to take it for your master's degree, but then they make you take it for your PhD. And now they're not going to for the spring because of this whole virus thing. So if you hear anything weird, it's my dog barking at the neighbors. The neighbors got the barkiest ass dogs. They'll just take those dogs out for a walk, and all the dogs do the whole time is bark. And they're like little dogs, of course. They don't shut up. Like, I don't even know what they're barking at, but the whole time they just walk around the block, and it's a small block where I live. You can hear them the whole time. You hear them little fucking dogs barking. So sometimes my dogs will, but I keep their dog door closed at this time because I know they'll just go outside and just start barking right at them, and I don't like that. So I leave them in for now. One of my dogs is going a little bit crazy. She likes to really go out there and bark at them. So I don't know if I'm going to go into the PhD program or not. That's I have to think about what I would even try to research. I'm thinking I could research possibly disabilities and e-learning. I was thinking about that, maybe something with like augmented reality or virtual reality. A lot of times people say like, oh, if you have a disability, it's harder to learn online. And I'm wondering if there's a way to actually leverage online learning to help people with disabilities. So that's kind of one thing I was thinking. And then another thing I was thinking is how would it affect the learning outcomes of undergraduate students if they had a PhD student in their class? And I'm really interested in that one. That one's kind of my favorite one because I could just go to enroll in undergraduate courses, which I'm going to anyway. I always do, and be a PhD student and see if people who are in my group or my contributions in the class, because I mean, let's be honest, I'm not brilliant. I'm barely average, but I'm a PhD student, and I think, I would be a PhD student, and I could think way differently than I thought when I was an undergrad. There's no doubt about that. Like, sometimes I would just say, okay, well, yeah, that sounds about right. And now I'm like, oh, really? Well, let me see the math equation you use to analyze that quantitative data. I never said that stuff before. So I wonder how that would affect if I had someone in my group. I'm trying to think as an undergrad, if I had someone in my group that was a PhD student, they were asking me all these crazy questions and all their contributions were like PhD level stuff, would I learn more as an undergrad in that situation? So would the overall learning outcomes improve in these classes with students who had PhD students amongst them? And I think that would probably be pretty easy to quantify, really, because you could just take previous outcomes and then you could put that up against the outcomes of the classes with students with PhDs. Now, that's a very simplified way because in my opinion, there's so many variables involved in there. You would have to do just massive amounts of data. I don't care about regression or any of that. You can't tell me if you take a sample of 30 of these situations and 20 times it's a better outcome and 10 times it's either the same or it's less, that you could say extrapolate that somehow and be like, oh, it's clearly by a deviation of 0.3% or whatever on the mu and all that, shit that I have no clue about. That it's statistically valuable or whatever they call that when they find something where it's like 0.002 means that it's actual. I don't even know how to say it, but it actually matters. It means something in the data. Okay, there's 30 fucking samples, guy. I guarantee you by the time you got to 120, that gap is closing. So you want to tell me that I'm going to sit here and do years and years and years of research to tell you that there's a 0.4% increase in having a PhD, and who cares? But over time, it just feels like that's what it would average out to. It's kind of like with the coronavirus. The more people get it, the less lethal it is because not everybody's dying from it. So he shrinks that number down and then you go, oh, that's the real number. Well, that's not the real number, because there's so many variables that you didn't take into account that couldn't even be accounted for you to say that it's that. And then so that's where that little thing comes in. Well, the margin of error is this way and that way by this much. And then you look at it and you're like, wow, it's like nothing. The statistical measurement is nothing. What does that really mean? Something? I want to have something where I go in there and I do it 100 times. We have 100 PhD students in this whole thing, and they all go into these undergrad classes, and they each do it for their 7 years in a PhD, and it's the same ones, and they go to the same classes like Psych 101 or Religion 107 or whatever, and they go to that one, and they always go to that one. And then you have another one that has no PhD student. And the problem that I see with that is that there's just different students in each class. So how do you account for that variable? So maybe I do need to go get a PhD. Maybe that's the kind of shit that you learn. I don't know. Maybe I need to take it to the next level. Now I've learned how to kind of like look and question these things. Now I need to figure out how to like, test and analyze it and find an answer. Who the fuck knows? I don't really know if I want to dedicate all my time and effort. That sounds like that's intense. You can't just, I don't think, ride by the skin of your pants and get a PhD. And that's kind of my MO. So I don't really know. I would hate to get in there and then get in 2 years, 3 years, and then just quit. I don't want to be a quitter either, but I do that. If I get into something I don't like, I'll quit, but I usually quit pretty quick so that it doesn't seem like I actually quit. It's kind of like, oh, I just didn't do it. If you get into something 2-3 years and then you just stop, that means you quit. And then all that time and money and effort is just kind of, it's not wasted, but in a sense, for your end goal, if your end goal is to actually earn a PhD, then yeah, it's totally wasted at that point. So I don't know what I'm going to do, but who knows? Maybe there's going to be some podcasts coming up. That would be pretty cool. I don't know what we would talk about. I'm not quite as insane as I used to be. I feel like I'm a little more level-headed, but I still think Joe Biden's creepy. I think he's a pervert. And I think people aren't paying attention to it because they just want anything other than Donald Trump. And this is where sometimes you get into those kind of scary situations. I mean, with Obama, it wasn't anybody except Obama. There were, it just wasn't like that. Now it's like anybody except for Trump. But then you have these people on Trump's side that are like super over the top Trump fans, and they don't want to hear none of that. So it's going to be interesting what happens in the next 3 months. Who knows? That might make the decision for me what I do. So anyway, that's really all I have to talk about today. I'm definitely not going to unleash this one. It was really long, but it felt good, it felt cathartic. I needed to do it. So thanks for everybody who listened, and we'll see you next time.